Hi 3W, hope you're all okay, and I just want to let you know that I'm missing you all and I can't wait to see you. Okay, what I'm going to do is I've managed to get a copy of Stig of the Dump, so every day I'm going to read a little bit of this story and upload it to YouTube for you. Okay, I know we've already read some of the chapter, the Snaggarts, but I'm going to start from the beginning of the chapter just to refresh our memories and just to help us remember what the story's all about. Okay, hope you enjoy this. Chapter 5, The Snaggarts. Why don't you go out and get some fresh air, Barney dear? Asked Grandmother. Barney stood and looked out the window. Doesn't look very fresh to me, he grunted. A yellow fog hung over the trees outside. The smoke from the back kitchen chimney stirred itself into it, and there seemed to be a smell of distant cement works. Never mind, dear. It's better than stuffing indoors all day. All right, Granny, I'll go out. After about 20 minutes, he had found his jersey mixed up with his bedclothes, one outdoor shoe under the bed and the other one under the chest in the hall. He wandered out into the garden. It was neither warm nor cold, and there was no wind at all. He made for the chalk pit, whistling and with his hands in his pockets. As he came near the edge of the pit, he stopped whistling and stood still. There were voices coming from the bottom of the pit. His pit? Well, perhaps it wasn't his pit. It didn't even belong to Grandfather. Or did it? Perhaps holes in the ground didn't belong to anybody. All the same, he was quite annoyed that other people should be poking around down the pit. He went cautiously to the edge and peeped over. Down there, among the tin cans and other rubbish, were 3 boys of about his own age or older, dressed in jerseys and trousers that were grubbier and more tattered than his own, and grey tennis shoes with holes in the toes. They all had long, rather greasy hair. Barney recognised them. They were the Snaggart boys, part of a large family that lived in an old house with tarred weatherboards and were always getting into trouble. At least, that was what the grown-ups said. But then, who didn't get into trouble? The Snaggarts seemed to be building some sort of shack for themselves out of dead branches and old sheets of corrugated iron, with a lot of horseplay and cries of, "No, not that way, Clever, like this, see?" Barney crawled into a place where a twisted tree trunk grew from the very edge of the cliff, hid himself behind it, broke off a handy-sized clog of clay and roots from the cliff edge, and hurled it at the roof of the shack. It curved through the air towards the target, but missed, and landed almost noiselessly on a mossy log. Barney chose himself another clod and threw it. This time it struck the bottom of the upturned pail and exploded like a bomb, scattering bits of clay over one of the Snaggarts. Who's chucking dirt?" cried the first Snaggart suspiciously. "I never," said another Snaggart. "Must have been him," he added, pointing to the third youngest. "Leave off, will you?" said the first Snaggart, "or I'll do, you see." "I never done nothing," protested the youngest Snaggart. "Oh yeah, you did, didn't you?" said the first. "No, I never." "Well, don't you do it again, that's all." At the top of the cliff, Barney, the cause of the trouble, chuckled to himself and broke off another clod. This time his aim was true, and the clod landed fair and square on the sheet of iron with the most satisfying clang. 3 Snaggart heads popped out at once, like ferrets in rabbit holes. "I told you someone was chucking dirt," the first Snaggart. "And I told you it wasn't me," said the youngest. They looked round, scowling at the floor of the pit. "All right, it's no use hiding. We can see you," called the eldest Snaggart. Barney hugged himself in silence behind his tree trunk. He knew this was just a bluff. They hadn't even looked in his direction. "It's old Albert, I bet," said the middle-sized Snaggart. "He's been following us." "We can see you, Albert," called the first Snaggart. "Come out of that bush or we'll come and do you." They were standing looking at the far end of the pit with their backs to Barney. With great care, Barney broke off as big a clod as he could find and aimed it again at the roof of the shack. It hit and exploded with another loud clang, scattering pieces over all three Snaggers, who ducked wildly and clutched at each other and then looked foolishly at being taken by surprise. They whispered fiercely among themselves, pointing at places on the edge cliff. "Come from behind us, did it? No, up there. He is. Don't be daft. He's up in them bushes. I tell you, I saw him." They all pointed in different directions at the edge of the cliff. "It's all right, Albert," called the eldest Snagger again. "It's no use you hiding." But this didn't worry Barney either. By the time they got to the top, he could be well away. The Snaggers must have thought this too, because they didn't make a move. They retired inside the rickety shack instead. Barney scored another direct hit on it and a near miss. Heads popped out each time and looked round fiercely. But he was too well hidden and they failed to spot him. But there seemed to be a lot of whispering going on in the shack, and then all three Snaggers came out and started walking towards the way out. The eldest called over his shoulder in a casual voice, "Goodbye, Albert," and the other two repeated it. "We're going home now, Albert," called the eldest. "It's our dinner time. But listen here, Albert, we know you're up there. Just keep your hands off our shack, see? We got something in there that's valuable. We just dare you to meddle with it, that's all." The Snaggers walked off towards the way out of the pit, whistling loudly and banging tins with sticks. Barney waited until he could hear their feet on the lane dying away. Funny, he thought, they've gone, still. Perhaps it is their dinner time. He came out from behind his tree and went round the edge of the pit to the low side and walked along the bottom to the shack the Snaggers had built. He wondered what the valuable thing was that they had left in it. There didn't seem to be anything except a paper bag full of chestnut conkers. "Pooh, silly old conkers," said Barney aloud. "They're not valuable." Perhaps they'd buried something. He dug around in the mossy floor and unearthed a very rusty tin box. It had writing on the outside. He could just make out the letters. "Gold block," it said. It felt heavy. Ought he to open it or not? He decided he would. There was no harm in just looking. The hinge lid was rusty at the bottom and wouldn't move. He banged at it with a stone. Out fell a rusty mass of screws, nuts, bolts, and curtain rings. Inside the lid of the box was more writing which said that gold box was the finest pipe tobacco made from choice Virginia leaf. Barney threw the tin away in disgust, and a voice said, "All right, mister, come out. We got you covered." It was the Snaggers. They'd played a trick on him and crept back. He came out of the shack and faced the Snaggers. One had a broken down air gun and the others were pointing sticks. "Caw, it ain't Albert," exclaimed the youngest Snagger. "We can see that," said the eldest roughly. "What's your name?" he said to Barney in the same voice. "Barney," said Barney. "What's yours?" "I'm the Lone Ranger, and he's Robin Hood, and he's William Tell," snapped the eldest Snagger. "Golly," exclaimed Barney. "Quiet," snapped the first Snagger. "What were you doing in our shack?" "Yeah, and what you mean by chucking dirt at us?" asked the second Snagger. "Yeah, and what you doing in our dump anyway?" piped the youngest fiercely. "Can if I want to," replied Barney, pretending not to mind. But he was not really feeling very comfortable. He was not sure just how rough these Snaggers could get. "Can if he wants to, he says," exclaimed the Lone Ranger, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "What shall we do with him, fellas?" "Tie him to a tree and shoot him full of arrows," suggested Robin Hood. "Put him in a dungeon and leave him to rot," said William Tell. "No, I reckon we ought to lynch him on the spot, String him up, said the Lone Ranger masterfully. We ain't got no rope, said Robin Hood. Well, we ain't got no bows and arrows, pointed out William Tell. Well, there certainly ain't no dungeons for miles around, said the Lone Ranger. Let's just give him a bit of slow torture. You wouldn't dare, said Barney, but he didn't feel too sure. Oh, wouldn't we? Sneered the Lone Ranger. Do it all the time, don't we? Give people the slow torture. Yes, and shoot 'em full of arrows, agreed Robin Hood. And put 'em in dungeons, added William Tell. I'll tell a policeman, said Barney stoutly. The eldest Snagger looked carefully around the pit. Can't see no policeman here, he said scornfully. I'll tell me granny, and she lives just up there, said Barney. The Snaggers collapsed in howls of laughter. He'd tell his granny, he says. Hear that, fellas? He'd tell his granny. They cackled. Barney felt his face going red and tears coming into his eyes. Then he thought of something. I'm going to tell Stig, he said calmly. The laughter went on. He's going to tell his Stig, cackled the Snagger. But Barney just stood there and smiled, and the laughter gradually died down. Who's Stig? The eldest Snagger asked suspiciously. Oh, a friend of mine, replied Barney airily. Garn, there ain't no such person, said the second doubtfully. Yeah, there is, and he's my friend, said Barney. Where's he live? Squeaked the smallest Snagger. Here, said Barney. Here, chorused the Snagger scornfully. What in the dump? Jeered the eldest Snagger, and they all laughed as if he had made a joke. Yes, said Barney. Didn't you know? Go on. You can't half tell him, said the second. What's he do? Tell us that then. He makes bows out of television aerials and arrows out of bits of flint, replied Barney. The Snaggers gaped at him with open mouths. Look here, said the eldest at last. This here Stig of yours, where is he then? A boy or a man? Barney had to think a little before he answered. Then, he's a caveman, he said. At once the Snaggers burst into jeers and laughter again. You soppy old caveman! He's got it out of a school book. He's pulling our legs, making out he knows a caveman. Come on, fellas, let's do him. Slow torture, they cried. But Barney leapt off the pile of rubble he was standing on and set off at a run towards the other end of the pit. The Snaggers were after him with shrill cries. He's off! Get him, fellas! You chicken! Run away, will ya? Barney jumped fallen tree trunks and burst through banks of nettles without caring for stings. He knew the bottom of the pit